Welcome to the UpLevel Podcast, Teagan. Thank you for saying yes.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Yeah. Mm.
Let's dive right in because here we are in 2026, a weekend, and the stars and the cosmos and the astrology are all doing the thing.
Yeah.
So before you give us like a highlight of what can be expected, how are you defining this concept, this term, right relationship?
Yeah. The first thing that comes up for me when I think about right relationship is being right sized as a human. And that's a big, big conversation. But the heart of it is that, especially in the West, we are heavily conditioned to function within this purview that we're making our reality. And this is beautiful. It's a beautiful kind of motivation to build the world the way we dream it, right? But something that I also find is at times the shadow of this kind of like progressive, big visioning state is that we can fall out of relationship with the larger ecosystem of support and relations that are all around us, seen and unseen, right? That is like our relationship with the land and the earth or the ancestors or even just our larger community, right? It becomes embedded within this kind of like sometimes hyper-individualist way of moving in the world. And so for me, right relationship is a way of right-sizing myself and saying, actually, I'm woven into something much bigger than me, and my participation matters, but so does my ability to collaborate with all of that, right? And to be a willing collaborator. And there's a harsher way that some of my teachers talk about this kind of like human-centric or even human supremacist thinking, where we get really big and we take up space and we believe that to a certain degree we're in full control. And so for me, it's the humbleness to say, I'm actually, it's not just about me. I'm not the center of the web. I'm a very vital part of it, but I'm like actively weaving myself back into that larger ecosystem to be in right relationship with all of those surrounding me. Yeah.
Thank you for articulating.
Right.
It's been a year that we've been exploring this theme, and thank you for articulating so elegantly, so beautifully where I am in this journey. That's not how I would define it a year ago, but certainly after the exploration and meeting wonderful humans like yourself, and then going to places like Brave Earth where we met and learning about ancestral lineage healing and learning more about being in right relationship with the land. I love this idea of being a right-sized person or a regular-sized human, as the teacher that was teaching us when we met, Daniel, says, a regular-sized human. That it blew my mind, coming from a very corporate organizational background of bigger, more, faster. And right now people are starting their new fiscal years and they have new 2026 goals. And one of the things we're working on at UpLevel is like unconditioning ourselves from those types of cycles and getting back into the natural rhythm of nature. So we start our new year come end of March when the equinox, and spring and the new energy is here. But for folks that are in that mandala, and that's a lot of our listeners, talk to us a little bit about how they might use the astrology to serve them in their planning and as they set goals for this new year.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful inquiry. And, I resonate. I think much of my own path has had to be like one foot in both worlds, right? I'm a business owner. I run it all myself. And so there's a reality where like I'm also very much intact, like how to say, in relationship with this larger momentum that we've built as a culture around growth and progress and these sorts of structures, right? But I think also as an astrologer, right? As a business owner, but also as an astrologer, it's helped me to reframe my felt sense of the larger kind of the cycles and pulsations of creation of the earth as a bigger part of like this universal rhythm that is almost like a macrocosm of the microcosm that we've built down here on earth. And I actually, you know, I'm one of these practitioners and astrologers that like I don't have any beef with the way that we've built our world at this kind of like business-oriented, progress-oriented pace. But I also think, like we're speaking to, there's a potential where we start to actually lose our finger on the pulse of that larger, more natural rhythm. And so this is what astrology and my relationship to astrology has actually done for my way of moving in the world, is it's woven me back into right relationship with cycles of earth and nature and forces much bigger than me that I don't pretend to understand, right? I don't think that astrology gives us answers, but I do think it allows us to ask better questions and to really be attuned to these cycles of life on Earth, right? Because it's a geocentric model. It is like by design about life on Earth. It's not about something way out there that's detached from Earth. And I'm always reminding people this in astrology readings. It's like, this is about you as a co-creator with nature's cycles, right? And so we can use it as a tool, which is the way it was intended, to track those patterns in creation and say, well, like, how do I then enter the current rather than move divergent to it, right? And there's so much astrology that I'm sure we'll talk about in this year, in 2026, that is just like, it's one big invitation for change and transformation and kind of like doing the things we said we were going to do and walking in the way we say we're going to walk. Yeah.
So we know that 2025 was a powerful, powerful year. And when I was wrapping up the year, so many clients were just exhausted and wrung out. And like a lot of people were saying, can we put this in the purview? Like, I'm good to say goodbye to it. I had a bit of a different experience, but there was like a shedding that took place for many people. I saw a lot of people's relationships, and whether it was professional ones or intimate ones, I saw a lot of people leave certain workplaces, are in like an in-between kind of right now. I saw a lot of things collapse. And I think being in this conversation of right relationship, I was able to bring a different perspective of it. Like, oh, great. Like we are shedding and letting go and burning down and breaking up for what you just said 2026 is about. So tell us. I've got like a full body tingle. Give us the preview, Teagan. What are we looking at this year?
Yeah, I love what you're speaking to. I think it's like the heart of what astrological inquiry can invite us into, is not just seeing growth as linear, but also seeing it as this kind of spiral or cyclical pulse, right? And I agree with you. Like, I feel it myself, but I also see it in like hundreds of people that I was doing readings for at the end of 2025. I'm like, oh, okay, the patterns are tracking. Like, we are all in what I've been calling kind of like the vestibule between two doors, right? Like, it felt very acute that the end of 2025 was what I was sensing, that people were just like tired of not seeing and making the changes that they know they're ready for and that they were desiring in their life. And that split, that dissonance creates so much exhaustion, because parts of us are ready to like bring in new changes and new cycles, and other parts of us are clinging. And that clinging, I think, is like the root of exhaustion, right? Where we're like so ready to let it go and close that door before we enter the next. And actually, like the first few weeks of this year of 2026 are like preparing to open that door into the next phase, right? But this might sound silly, but I really do feel this to be true. If folks have gone on like big journeys, like maybe big travel journeys, and had big experiences, or even like sat with plant medicines and had these big experiences, right? That to me is like what we're coming out of is this really big experience of insight. We see the changes we want to make. We see like what is possible for us, right? I think 2025 allowed us to see what is possible. And then 2026, this year, our task is to start like integrating that, to start making the changes little by little that we know we've been ready for. But as after any big journey or experience, there's like a window of opportunity where we can sit for a minute and really sense into like, what are the patterns that I'm maybe still clinging to? What are my beliefs about where I'm coming from based on everything I created in my life up until this moment? And how has that actually created a bit of a limited frame of reference for what I think is possible? Because the thing about 2026 is that it's kind of going to pop the lid off of what we actually thought was possible for us. And I think it's going to challenge us to actually expand our sense of what we can actually create in our life. And that means thinking outside the box of what we know. That's challenging, right? Especially for folks like myself that want to plan and want to structure and want like the slow progress play by play. So I would say the heart of it that really we're still kind of in a bit at the beginning of this year is that incubation chamber of sitting in the integration and allowing that to not be only where we're creating from, but to be good like data that we've collected about what we've done in the past, but almost like cleaning the slate for saying, what do I really want to live into or dream into? And I've been confronted by the reality that with so much disruption and strain that the past year has caused, it's like our nervous system is actually a little afraid to dream, right? That the scarcity has cut us off from possibility. So I think that the challenge right now is like, can you breathe into that a bit and open up your sense of what is actually possible? Realize that you've created a bit of a limit for yourself because we're in a contracted state naturally, right? Like that was a big year with a lot of unexpected stuff. So our challenge actually, I think, is to grow our capacity a bit right now to dream a bit bigger than we're comfortable with. And, you know, I know better as an astrologer, whether we like it or not, we're slowly going to be pulled into that process. But this is the thing about astrology is when we know a little bit about the shape of these cycles, we can choose how we want to participate, right?
I love this. It just feels... Well, it feels like too, we're in winter, and I know in different parts of the planet are not in winter. But there's something about this permission from the cosmos to go inward and to keep sitting with what unfolded versus like new year, new me, which I think most of us, like, we get that is a construct that we can let go of. Please. It's like, let's sit a little bit longer in the silence, in the pain, in the celebration, in the joy, in what, what broke down, broke open, broke up before we get into stepping into this next iteration. So like if I'm inside an organization, but still under the mandala of like, okay, Q1, here we go. Boom, boom, boom. What's some guidance you have to offer?
This is a great question. I think it's about almost similar to your initial question about right relationship. It's almost like finding right pace and not forcing things. Because, I have some folks that I work with that are like leaders in pretty big organizations, and they have these dreams and visions that are kind of like, or even deadlines that are like in tandem with the business growth arc, right? And that's great. But my pushback and my encouragement to them is to say, like, if you actually sense into this, how much do you feel you're forcing it? How much do you feel that really like the time isn't here yet to plant this seed? It's maybe like a month from now. And I'm not like, to be honest with you, 2026 is a big growth and expansion and action year. So I'm saying like this year is the year for like doing something radical and bringing these new ideas to the forefront. But I also know that if we're really moving at the pace of the earth, we have to like temper our urgency around when that thing comes to be, and really listen to these cycles as they're unfolding. And it's funny to hear you say that, you know, your new year is March, because this is when a lot of the big astrology starts to set in. It's very much in tandem with the earth cycles. And that's often the case because astrology is, of course, part of a larger natural web of the other planetary bodies. So my encouragement is to actually kind of like find right pace with that. And if there's urgency, which is a very like natural thing to feel when we have these deadlines and growth arcs that we've set, the truth of it is, can we like release that control a bit to then be in right relationship with the larger pulse, and also like a bit of trusting that these cycles are trying to weave us in, if again we're willing to be a collaborator with them and not just like be like, I'm a stubborn person, so I'm like, no, I set this date, I'm gonna do it my way.
Right.
And meanwhile I see the astrology's like, yeah, but if you just like push this out and wait to catch this wave, I have proof over and over again that it's usually like a more syncretic growth arc that I'm able to access. So the invitation is to listen to that a bit and not try to force, because it's here for you, but maybe not at the pace that you set. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And so folks that like have the authority inside their organization to slow down the arc right now, there's an invitation to consider that. And then perhaps you're in a role where you don't have that authority. What you can do is use your own self-agency and ask some powerful questions. Like, what would happen if we waited 6 weeks?
Yes. Yeah.
What would be possible if we just slowed down a little bit more and got a little bit more accuracy around the intention behind this work, the goals we're setting? So like we want to encourage like cultures of leaders who are tuning into these rhythms and asking these inquiries to serve the whole.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think what I have found to be true, I mean, I've been a professional astrologer for almost a decade now, and not just in personal work, but consulting with businesses and people that want to like bring projects into the world. And so I've actually had to really do my homework in seeing what works, right? And how to catch that current of growth that will be most beneficial, especially for not just an individual, but a whole organization. That's a lot of collective energy to kind of bring into the wave, right? And I find that firstly, it's worth saying, I don't think we can mess any of this up, right? But I do think that there's a way that it's, again, more in harmony with these larger movements. And rather like what I notice at times is like a bit of clunkiness when we're trying to force it, right? Like we have this big idea, this big project we're wanting to bring to the table, and we bring it in such a way where there is that urgency, and it almost like has the potential to like, how to say, have this boomerang effect, right? Where maybe the potential that could have been there a month out when a certain planetary ingress was ready to catch that wave is more harmonized, right? So it's not to say that there's a way you go about this wrong, but it is to say that listening and attunement usually serves your organization more effectively. Yeah.
Teagan, how did astrology find you? How did you find astrology?
This is such a good question. Well, I was in an earlier part of my life, I was working in New York City, which is I was working in New York City in the fashion industry. And it was really good exposure actually to like corporate America. Like you're in the heart of the world in New York City, especially in the fashion industry. And I saw the hustle, and I also got to participate in it a bit, but I personally felt so out of rhythm with what I could sense was like a natural pace of growth, right? New York is like on overdrive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it also like really taught me a lot about running my own business and what's needed there. But I started studying astrology, honestly, as a total skeptic because someone brought it into my life. And I was like, I think that this is full of crap. So I'm going to study it and try to find the truth because that's kind of the person I am. And I think maybe a year into that study, I was really seeing the way that it moved through the world. Like there was evidence I was seeing of the patterns that I was studying, right? So it had to prove to me that there was something to it. And that was like 12 years ago now. So since then, I've been like a rigorous student, but also a teacher and a practitioner. Because I had evidence of the ways that it was like this secret circuit of growth and like cyclical growth that was working for folks in my life as I would like consult them and try to find like living proof of its efficacy, right? So I eventually then was like, okay, I'm going to take this more seriously and become a practitioner, become someone who reads and consults folks on their own growth cycles, right?
And was it the astrology that was like kind of the antecedent that got you into the other, like death dueling and ancestral healing? Like, what was the impetus for that?
That's a good question. It was the astrology. Like when I look at all of the different things that I have studied and also like what makes up my business, I always say that astrology is the bedrock because it not only helps me to kind of gauge my own growth cycles as a business owner, but it has created this foundation of right relationship with the bigger powers of like nature and creation that I feel underpin my relationship to ancestral tending or, I am an Ayurvedic doctor. So there's that too. It's like these other ways of relating to nature and the body, but also like our human nature that I feel, again, astrology is like, it's my bread and butter, and it's something I always come back to. Yeah.
It's beautiful. I'm trusting that some folks are getting super inspired that like maybe have felt such an affinity with astrology, and through hearing your story will like, okay, I'm going to go deeper into the study of this because here's a human that's been doing it, and just to see the ripple effects it's had in your life, in your world, and the folks that you serve. Okay, so after this incubation period in 2026, what happens next?
So we got a little sneak preview of this. I was saying a couple of years ago now that 2025 was like the trailer, the movie trailer to the story and the timeline that 2026 opens up for us. And so I want to give just a point of reference here for the technicalities of these cycles, that in the summer of 2025, like late July into early August, we actually had some of these bigger outer planets like Saturn and Neptune and Pluto and Uranus. We had them ingress into the territories that are going to really, really be our teachers for the years to come. So we had a sneak preview, right? We had about a month where all of those outer planets had dipped their toe, as it were, into this new chapter. And I noticed that that's where people started to feel some agitation around these cycles that they're just so done with, right? That's where they felt what I feel almost like the timeline or the cycle start to close. And I always say that friction, when we feel that agitation between like old ways of being rubbing up against new ways of being, this is the friction that creates the fire of change, right? And I think that is actually the perfect kind of analogy for what 2026 really holds for us. So specifically, all of those outer planets that I mentioned, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, and Jupiter. And for those of you that don't have any idea what I'm talking about, like these are the planets that influence collective growth patterns. We call them the outer, or I call them the collective planets. Whereas the others, you might know Venus and the moon and Mercury, the sun, these are more personal. They influence personal development patterns, right? So to have all of these big players shifting into new territories in the sky, right? They're moving from one kind of, I'll say like theme, like growth theme into another, right? They're moving across different zodiac territories in the sky. That is a huge cue. I think of it as like the shifting of the guard, right? Where all of these energies are suddenly in new territories. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll say from a kind of elemental analogy here, for the past 3 to 5 years, we've been in a heavily earth and water territory. Earth and water is very like dense and unctuous, but it's also very sticky. It's very possible that we create things when there's a lot of earth and water that get us stuck in patterns and growth cycles that are like hard to get out of. And I'm seeing this. It's hard to get out of how we've been functioning.
Oh, yeah.
So we're shifting into air and fire. Ooh. And the question I've been asking folks just to sit with is like, what does air do to fire? What does the wind do to fire? It fans the flame. It makes more fire, right? So 2026 is an air and fire year that's being initiated, right? Saturn and Neptune will be in fire signs in Aries. Pluto's in Aquarius. Uranus is entering Gemini. Like these are all air and fire energies. So they're here to kind of like fan the flames of change. But I also know that at a more psychological level, this has a lot to do with our stories about reality. Again, what we think is possible. And air having a lot to do with the intellect, fire having a lot to do with creative power. So these forces are fanning one another. And it's new. Like I will say, we haven't felt this kind of combination in many years. And I don't actually think that the summer of 2025 gave us enough information around what this will feel like. I think it gave us a little taste. But now that these planets are shifting gears and will stay there for at least like, I'm talking like the next 3 to 7 years. This is a big window of time that things are changing. It's a different flavor. It's a different, I feel it's a whole new cycle that's opening. Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of, what that could look like, how the astrology could impact on the human level?
Yeah, this is a great, it's a great point because I think what I've been noticing is that a lot of our attention for the past, I'll say handful of years, right? Because it's kind of like, it's going to affect different people personally. But the last handful of years, I think there's been an emphasis on collective resources and developing structures in businesses and our personal life that have this kind of, I'll say, more traditional arc to how we're building things and how we're even thinking about building things, right? Very emphasized on like material resource and gain, which is all very pragmatic. Like it's great. It's pragmatic. It adjusts to the structures we've built collectively. And I use it as contrast for saying that the air and fire energies have a lot more to do. They're not so interested in moving by traditional systems or modes. They're much more interested in like the real vision of what is possible at both a organizational or personal level. And I think that it brushes up against our conditioning because I know that there are parts of all of us that are like, but is that realistic? Like if I live into this dream or I bring this project to the table and say like, this is actually what I'm really thinking about. This is what I'm really dreaming about. It might on paper look like there's no infrastructure to hold that kind of vision, right? So then our responsibility is to build that infrastructure after the fact. But I find that in traditional models of growth at organizational levels, we are dreaming within the container of the infrastructure that already exists, right? We're saying like, this is what's available to us. Now we must adapt our vision to fit the container, right? This is the opposite. This is the other way of visioning. It's saying like we're emphasizing, creative vision and really letting ourselves like just get outside those limitations for a moment to say, what is really possible if I remove that barrier just for a moment? And then I can bring the infrastructure back into place and maybe, grow around it as it were, or adapt it.
So exciting.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. And I'm sure it can be frightening as well, just depending on the context. But I'm having a vision of just cultures of leaders.
Yeah.
Cultures of leaders, people are going to find that self-agency to ask the question, to say, let's pause, to say, let's actually look at it from a different perspective. And that's part of what's going to create this firestorm of things continuing to shift and burn and break, because people are going to rise.
Yeah.
They're going to rise into their own authority and knowing. And tell me if that's what I'm hearing you say. So this is like 2026 this is what it's about.
Yeah. And I will say this much too, because I think I'm like, yeah, the firestorm, I see that on the horizon, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to remind myself and others that I work with that this is the beginning of a very extended trajectory. And I think that over the course of, I will say between 3 to 7 years, right, is where we start to see the culmination of these different ways of doing creative vision in general. And it's something that I've really been quite moved by, because some of the folks I work with that are maybe building their own business or even artists I really am like, wow, this is the time for visionaries to be a more formative part of building models of growth that are actually not so mired in how we've traditionally run things and how we've traditionally thought about growth patterns and structures, right? I see honestly the glimmer of artists and people that are really thinking outside the bounds woven into these ways of building new infrastructure and new foundations that can support growth in different ways, ways that we might not even be able to imagine. But I think that it's creatives, it's people that are really challenging the norm, and finding doorways, right? Finding these entries into whole new ways of thinking about what's possible. And it is, again, a slow trajectory. I don't think we're going to feel, I don't know, I parts of me are maybe, but I don't think we're going to feel too blown out by it. I think that it's going to kind of slowly shift the way we're thinking and doing these larger decisions, Yeah.
So it's more about the work that's going to happen is more about shifting mindset and structures and how we co-create and bring our work or our purpose, our missions to the world, but not necessarily the release or the birth or the launch of those missions. Is that more what's going to happen in this further down the road?
Yeah. I think it's all kind of an evolutionary process, right? I think, honestly, I'm the kind of person that feels we only really learn by doing. And so I think it will be more of this attunement, and our role is to listen to that call and response to say okay, I'm going to bring these projects into the world, and I'm going to see how they move, how they land, how they kind of live in reality, and gather data over time that 3-4 years from now we'll probably be at the point where we've gathered enough data to realize and have evidence that it's possible to do this whole structural change differently than we expected, Yeah.
That I find that it titrates my nervous system.
Yes, exactly.
Going back to your explanation or definition of right relationship, it's right size person.
Yeah.
It's not about okay, this year in the firestorm, I'm going to come out of the ashes and here's my purpose. And this is the expression of it in the world. Or in the system I'm a part of, I'm going to blow it all up. It's a titration. That's what I'm getting. And that makes, I can relax into it rather than some of the old ways of being that I know are very much conditioned in me of like, okay, set the goals, drive forward, get her done. Don't listen to don't listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just don't listen. Just be so focused on outcome.
Mhm.
But where you're pointing us, where the astrology is pointing us is like, we are going to actually all become students and maybe teachers of
Mhm.
this right relationship with the cosmos, this intelligence that has been here all along, but we have been, unfortunately, many of us cut off from it, but it's coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're going to, more and more of us are going to be able to tune into it in our unique ways and bring it in.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautifully said. And yeah, I think if listeners gather anything from what I'm sharing about the astrology, my highest recommendation is to simply consider that attunement, to simply consider the attunement to those larger pulses. And for me, it's like taking that leaned back seat where I do one thing. I'm not removing my participation. I'm participating, but I'm seeing like, okay, I'm going to do this thing and then see how it starts to move and create a feedback loop, right? Like gather data by listening and having that receptivity where it's like, if the astrology can tell you one thing, it's that change is coming. But that change isn't going to be some sweeping hand of God that blows us off our feet. That change is subtle. It's like if you're paying attention, you'll notice that things start to move differently, right? People start to respond differently. And so that attunement, I feel, above all else, is like your greatest asset in this new year and the years to come. Yeah. Yeah.
Teagan, give our listeners a few tips on how to grow the muscle of attunement.
Hmm. Hmm. I think it starts with a self-inquiry around how much we feel the need to be in total control of our circumstances. This is at least where my own journey began with that attunement. Do I feel the need to have my hands on the steering wheel and only my hands? Like every move is mine rather than it being a dialogue, right? And really just an inquiry around seeing myself as part of a larger ecosystem of both like community, like the people next to me, but also like an expanded concept of community that also includes the earth, that also maybe even includes the ancestors. Although I know that that's sometimes an edge for people because that now we're relating to the unseen, but the earth is very much seen, right? And she's loud. It's not like a quiet attunement that is needed there necessarily. So for me, it's about paying attention, right? And it's about reframing my seat. Am I like on a throne and this is my realm to do as I will? Or am I seated in a circle? And my community, my peers, my family, my friends, the land where I live, all of these other beings are seated in this circle with me, and we're developing counsel. I'm noticing that my actions and choices have impact on that circle of relations. And so it's less about proclaiming what I'm going to do and what I want and envision, and more offering it in this more collaborative way. That to me is the beginnings of developing this sort of attunement. Yeah.
You've just given me a deeper, holistic, no, I want to say deeper, more whole understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion. So it's like I'm having this awareness of like, okay, that information came so hard. I know more so, say, in North America, but there's this deeper teaching you just dropped of like inclusivity of it all. And how can we get so attuned to the wholeness of who we are, what we're a part of, who we're a part of, where we come from? Oh,
Yeah.
may it be so, Teagan.
Yeah. 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 That's it.
I just want this so badly for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we've gotten so carried away and caught up in language and polarity and rightness and wrongness. And oh,
Yeah.
like that's the thing that I feel there's such a fatigue.
Yes. This is a great point. Yeah.
And what you're bringing is this like inclusivity of like the wholeness of this. I'm lost, a little bit lost for words. So maybe you help me.
No,
What are you hearing? Yeah.
yeah, I really love your point there about the fatigue because, again, speaking from personal experience, I I I was born into American society and told that like it's survival of the fittest out here. It's me against the world. And that is it's the blueprint of the reality we're all functioning within, right? It's very hyper individualist. And by nature, right? I don't have to get into a whole rant about traditional like ancestral collectivism, right? To say that it's very obvious we can't do any of this alone, right? And when I say that, I don't just mean not having the support of friends or family or colleagues. I also mean having the support of the larger web that is holding all of us within it, which is, again, the cycles of Earth. It's kind of a circular way of talking about everything we've been talking about. That these larger cycles of creation are not just about us catching the wave to grow, but it's about belonging. It's about something to lean back into that can hold us and support us. And we can also support it in this kind of collaborative attunement that is cyclical, sustainable growth. We know this. Everything in nature that is deemed a sustainable system is a circular growth model. It's not linear. And so for me, it comes down to our responsibility as a collaborator is like, am I functioning in this individual linear way still, where it's like me against the world, or am I allowing myself to be held by this larger expanded sense of community, right? And for me, ancestors are a part of that. But I think before you go there, starting with the land is vital. Starting with like right where you are, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Such good medicine that you're bringing. Another big aha that's happening over here for me is I just dropped it because I was like way out there with like, I was like, oh, it's all coming together. This year exploration of this conversation we've been in around right relationship. That's it. I said when I was talking about some people's experience of 2025 and that I had a different experience. I felt really held this year. And I noticed when you were talking about, expanding to not like beyond friends, colleagues, partners. And I think it's because I've been in this exploration and tuning more into the land and the seen and the unseen, the ancestors. And um, I, I've just felt so held.
Beautiful.
And um, one of the things that I have in the past had a hard time being with is loneliness, mine and others. So I've often done things to avoid that experience, like kept really busy, have many businesses, always creating, go, go, go. And I feel like what I might be stepping into in this new year is becoming closer to my loneliness and others, and that real lived experience that is something we share. And I want to have the courage to like actually sit with, I'm going to call her, I don't know, but the loneliness and let that be a teacher for me this year, and let that help me deepen to this understanding of right relationship and what it means to be held. I know it will serve my leadership. I know it will serve my community and the work that I'm bringing to the world. And I'm scared to go do that because there's been a pattern that's worked for me not to do that.
Right. Yeah, maybe so.
Thank
And
you. It's beautiful. I'm having a beautiful therapy session with you here, my friend.
I
Thank you.
love it. I mean,
Yeah.
but what you're speaking to, honestly, is the truth, right? What you're speaking to is not an isolated incident. And I think at times what I'm so confronted by is that most of us are convinced our loneliness is a me problem. That that
Mm.
that somehow I'm doing it wrong and I'm lonely and cut off from, resource. But I want to bring the gentle acknowledgement that like the structures of our world as we know it, with no faults to anyone, it just is this way, that it's a systemic outcome. It's the result of many, many years and generations of this conditioning that it's me, myself, and I building the world. Right. And also, of course, a departure from these more animist or collective ways of weaving ourselves into this larger ecosystem of belonging. It's the hardest thing I've ever tried to do is like belong to the world and actually let myself feel those relationships that are other than human, right? It's very hard when you don't grow up in a culture that's just inherently embedded within. And so I say that because like I know myself as a business owner, right? It's like it's lonely out here to do it your way. And to be someone that I'm sure many of your listeners do think divergent to the norm, even within the organizations or structures that have been handed to us all. And so none of it is an isolated incident, right? It's all a result of these larger systemic designs. Um, and I also think being like sitting with your loneliness is a great way to open a door, right? It's a great way to find like other pathways. Yeah, of
Yeah.
belonging. Yeah.
Yeah. How can our listeners find you and find your work? Knowing this will be in the show notes, but what do you want them to hear from you?
Yeah, I think what is important to hear from me, I'm a writer and an astrologer. I have a weekly podcast for those that want to like tune in more to these cycles. And I also really emphasize practical magic. I'm not really a big fan of using astrology as this like playing God giving answers. I'm more interested in using astrology as a tool for like self-inquiry and self-development. And I think that that's what these cycles allow us to do is ask better questions, like I said. So the Altar of Stars on Substack is where you'll find most of my work. And my own practice is called The Altar, where I have one-on-one and group offerings in these realms of astrology and ancestry, these sorts of things. Yeah.
Oh, and we're so lucky we got, just like a little sample of it today. But I hope our listeners and those who've been along for the ride just saw the impact of Teagan's medicine on me. Like I really felt like I was in a, um, I want to say trance, like, and maybe that's not the right word, but it was like this I really felt the healing. I've received a lot of healing in my time with you. So I'm so grateful to know you and to know the good work that you're doing on the planet. And if you were going to offer us, you've offered us so many words of wisdom around right relationship and this year of astrology in 2026, where do you want to leave us in this moment?
Ooh. The biggest piece that I've been sitting with myself is it's not so much about trusting those larger cycles to weave me into them, but actually trusting myself to really like listen and that I know how to listen. And so that's what I'll leave you all with is like, you already know how to do this. Yeah.
You know how to listen. 2026. Let's tune in. Thank you, beautiful, beautiful human, Teagan. Really appreciate you.
Such an honor.